1 inch of toothpaste, exactly 1 inch, squeezed onto the royal toothbrush each morning by a servant, not by King Charles himself, by someone whose job it is to ensure the paste doesn't exceed or fall short of that precise measurement. If it's wrong, it goes back. Just sit with that for a moment. A grown man, a king, and somewhere in Buckingham Palace or Clarence House, there's a human being whose morning includes performing a task that takes 4 seconds. A task most of us master by age 6, because the monarch cannot be troubled to do it himself. Now, here's where this gets complicated, because the story you've probably heard about royal servants, the exploitation narrative, the headlines about slave wages at the palace, that story is missing something. Something significant. And by the end of this, you're going to have to do some maths yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to conclude, but you're going to have numbers in your head that might change how you think about all of this. Or they might not. That's the thing. This isn't a simple story. Let's start with what we know. Grant Harrold served as a butler to the then Prince Charles at Highgrove House from 2004 to 2011. 7 years inside the heir's household. 7 years of protocols and preferences, and the kind of specificity that would make most of us twitch. Harrold's accounts, shared in various interviews after leaving service, describe a working environment where every detail had been calibrated to Charles's exact requirements. The toothpaste is just the beginning. Former servants, some speaking anonymously, some through intermediaries, have described waste paper baskets positioned with geometric precision within arm's reach. Why? Because Charles won't stoop, won't extend himself. The bin must be exactly where his hand naturally falls when he's finished with something. Move it 3 inches to the left, and you've created a problem that requires human intervention to solve. There's a story, and this one really crystallizes everything, about an envelope. It fell, just slightly beyond the prince's immediate grasp. Not on the floor, not across the room, just a bit further than he could reach without shifting forward in his chair. He rang for a butler to retrieve it. Let that sink in. A bell was rung. A human being was summoned to pick up an envelope that was perhaps 18 inches away. But the envelope is almost mundane compared to the shoelaces. According to accounts from former household staff that circulated through British media in the 2000s, Charles's shoelaces must be ironed flat before being threaded through his shoes. Ironed, flat. The logic, apparently, is that properly pressed laces look neater and lie more smoothly. Someone's job includes running a hot iron over fabric strings that will be hidden inside leather brogues and covered by trouser hems. Then there's the bath. Former staff have described precise requirements for water temperature and depth, not warm or hot, but specific readings that must be checked and confirmed. The plug pulled at exactly the right moment. The towels warmed to a particular standard. A process that most adults manage while half asleep before their morning coffee becomes, in royal hands, a multi-step operation requiring dedicated personnel. Breakfast presents its own choreography. The geometry of the table setting, the angle of the newspaper. Former servants have described butter portions cut to exact specifications, positioned precisely on the plate, every morning, without variation. The kind of consistency that would be pathological in anyone who wasn't raised to expect it as their birthright. Tom Bower's biography, Rebel Prince, published in 2018, consolidated many of these accounts from former staff members. Bower documented patterns that corroborated the earlier reports: the toothpaste, the envelope, the precisely positioned bins, the iron shoelaces. These emerged in his telling not as isolated eccentricities, but as symptoms of something deeper, something institutional. And that's where this gets interesting, because Charles wasn't born demanding 1 inch of toothpaste. He was made this way. The system that produced him started taking shape in the 16th century. The Royal Archives document over 386,000 employment records from royal residences between 1526 and 1924, an unbroken tradition of service stretching back to the Tudor monarchs. Very early in English history, the royal household divided into three main sections: the chapel with its staff of clerks, the hall where daily life was conducted, and the chamber where the monarch's private life unfolded. Each division required dedicated staff whose entire purpose was ensuring the sovereign never wanted for anything. Never wanted for anything. Think about what that means across generations. Think about what it does to a person raised from infancy in that environment. The skills ordinary people acquire through necessity, making tea, preparing simple meals, managing their own clothing, simply never needed to be learned when staff stood perpetually ready. The master of the households department emerged as the central authority over domestic operations. Wikipedia describes this role as overseeing everything from the royal kitchens to the pages and footmen who attended to personal service, to the housekeepers who maintained the physical spaces. The Lord Chamberlain's office, the most senior office of the royal household, coordinated ceremonial functions above them all. These weren't merely organizational conveniences. They embodied a philosophy that the monarch's attention should never be diverted by mundane concerns, that every physical need should be anticipated and met before it could even register as a need. The system was designed to remove friction from royal life, and it succeeded so thoroughly that it removed opportunities for basic competence as well. The hierarchy within this system deserves attention because it shapes everything about how servants experience their work. Royal households have always operated on strict stratification. Senior servants, valets, ladies' maids, senior housekeepers, occupy positions of genuine responsibility and, historically, considerable informal power. They control access, they manage schedules, they know secrets. Below them, the housemaids, footmen, kitchen staff, and cleaners perform the physical labor that keeps the operation running. The divide isn't just about wages, though wages differ substantially across levels. It's about proximity. Senior servants interact directly with royals. Junior staff might work for years without exchanging a single word with the people they serve. This creates a peculiar dynamic. The footman positioning Charles's wastepaper basket with geometric precision might never receive a direct instruction from the king himself. The requirement passes through layers, from Charles to a valet, from the valet to a senior footman, from the senior footman to whoever actually moves the bin. The person doing the task may have no idea why it matters. They simply know it does. And that bin, it needs to be in the same position tomorrow, and the day after. Forever. Charles Philip Arthur George was born on November 14, 1948, into this apparatus. From his first moments, he was attended by nannies, nursemaids, household staff who anticipated his every need. He wasn't just a wealthy child being spoiled. He was being prepared for a role that traditionally demanded complete insulation from ordinary concerns. His grandmother, the Queen Mother, maintained one of the most extensively staffed households in the family. Charles spent considerable time under her influence during his formative years. By multiple accounts from biographers and royal historians, she embodied the pre-war approach to royal service: elaborate, formal, unapologetic about requiring extensive attendance. Her household at Clarence House operated with rituals that predated the welfare state, the Beatles, the entire modern era. Dozens of staff, specific requirements for every occasion, a way of living that most British people had abandoned by the 1960s, but that persisted behind palace walls as though nothing had changed. And Charles absorbed those expectations, like a language learned in childhood, natural, unquestioned, simply how things are. Princess Diana understood this, eventually. She entered that world as an outsider when she married Charles in July 1981. She'd grown up in aristocratic circumstances. Her family seat, Althorpe, employed domestic staff, but nothing prepared her for the totality of royal household service. In her panorama interview with Martin Bashir, broadcast on November 20th, 1995, and in conversations later shared by friends and biographers, Diana described her initial astonishment at the degree of attendance surrounding every aspect of royal life. She had learned to dress herself, to cook basic meals, to drive a car. She knew how to iron a blouse if she needed to. Charles had never needed to acquire these capabilities. The need had simply never arisen. The difference wasn't merely stylistic. It reflected fundamentally different formations. Diana insisted on taking William and Harry to school herself, on hugging them publicly, on maintaining connections to ordinary life that her husband's upbringing had never encouraged. She queued in shops. She took the boys to McDonald's, small acts, but revolutionary within an institution that had spent centuries eliminating any need for its principals to do anything for themselves. We'll come back to William. His approach is interesting, different from his father's in ways that might matter. But here's the thing about the toothpaste, the envelope, the ironed shoelaces, the precisely positioned bins, the geometric butter arrangements. These details, delicious as they are for anyone who enjoys watching absurdity, they're the engagement bait. They're the hooks, the part of the story that makes you keep watching because you can't quite believe any of this is real. The real question is different. The real question is, what's it actually like to work for these people? And are they being exploited? Because that's the narrative that exploded in 2022 and 2023. Job listings for Buckingham Palace positions became publicly visible. Advertisements for housekeeping assistant positions appeared on the royal household's official website and on standard job boards. The listed salary, £22,000 to £24,000 per year. Let that number land. The UK minimum wage for workers aged 21 and over reached £10.42 per hour in April 2023 and rose to £11.44 per hour in April 2024. For a standard 37.5-hour work week, that translates to roughly £22,300 annually. Palace housekeepers were being offered approximately minimum wage. In central London, one of the most expensive cities on earth, to work for a family whose wealth defies ordinary comprehension. The Republic Campaign Group, they advocate for abolishing the monarchy, highlighted these figures immediately. Headlines about slave wages at the palace dominated coverage. Commentators performed straightforward arithmetic. If staff work standard hours at £22,000, they earn minimum wage. If they work the extended hours that major events reportedly require, and state funerals, coronations, diplomatic visits do require round-the-clock preparation, their effective hourly rate drops below legal minimums. Former staff members who spoke to journalists corroborated that royal household positions often demand availability far exceeding any standard workweek. The funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022 required hundreds of staff working around the clock for days. The coronation of King Charles III in May 2023 demanded the same. No overtime rates for history. No time and a half for serving foreign dignitaries. The symbolism proved irresistible. Workers earning barely above the legal minimum to ensure chandeliers sparkle above heads wearing jewels worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. Servants ironing shoelaces, measuring toothpaste, retrieving envelopes from 18 inches away. For a man whose personal fortune runs to hundreds of millions of pounds, the exploitation narrative wrote itself. And it dominated public discourse about royal employment throughout 2023 and into 2024. And now for the complication. Because that exploitation narrative rests on an incomplete accounting of compensation. Royal household positions, particularly at the housekeeping and footman level, typically include something the headlines didn't mention: accommodation at no cost to the employee. Staff live either within royal residences themselves or in nearby housing maintained by the household. Buckingham Palace maintains staff quarters within its sprawling complex. These aren't distant dormitories in Zone 6, an hour's commute from anything. These are rooms in Westminster and Kensington, central London. Within walking distance of Hyde Park, the Thames, the cultural and professional heart of one of the world's great cities. Have you checked rental prices in Westminster lately? I have, and the numbers are startling. Property data from Rightmove and Zoopla shows that a modest studio or one-bedroom flat in Westminster, the borough containing Buckingham Palace, commands between £1,800 and £2,500 per month in 2024. Using a conservative middle estimate of £2,000 monthly, annual housing costs reach £24,000. That's the entire salary figure, just for housing, before you've eaten a single meal or turned on a single light. But wait, the compensation extends beyond housing. Staff receive meals, typically breakfast, lunch, dinner, and often a fourth meal or tea, prepared in staff dining facilities by palace kitchens. 4 meals a day, cooked for you, free of charge. Utilities including heat, electricity, and water are covered. No energy bills in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Some positions include private dental care and medical coverage beyond what the National Health Service provides. The 2023 housekeeping assistant job listing on the Royal Household's official website specifically mentioned live-in accommodation and meals provided, alongside the cash salary figure. The information was right there. Most of the coverage just didn't mention it. Now let's do the maths. I said I'd make you do it yourself, but I'll provide the numbers. Annual housing value in Westminster, £24,000. London utilities have become brutal lately. The UK energy price cap, the broader cost of living pressures. Average monthly utility bills for a small flat run approximately £150 to £200. Council tax for a Band D property in Westminster costs around £900 annually. Water rates add another £350 yearly. Total utility and council tax expenses, roughly £3,500 annually. Food in central London, with its premium pricing, costs between £50 and £80 weekly for someone eating economically. At £60 weekly, and that assumes home cooking, which workers pulling extended hours during state occasions may find difficult, annual food costs reach £3,120. But palace staff aren't cooking for themselves. They're getting 4 meals a day from professional kitchens. That's arguably worth more. Let's call it £4,000 to £5,000 in annual value. Private health insurance in the UK costs between £1,000 and £2,500 annually for comprehensive individual coverage, according to industry surveys by services like comparethemarket.com. Private dental insurance, covering treatments beyond NHS basics, runs £150 to £400 annually. Add it up. Housing, £24,000. Utilities and council tax, £3,500. Food, £4,500. Private medical, £1,500. Dental, £300. Total value of in-kind benefits, approximately £33,000 to £35,000 per year. Added to the £22,000 cash salary, total compensation approaches £55,000 to £60,000 annually. For a housekeeping position, a figure that rivals or exceeds many London professional salaries. More than starting teachers earn, more than many NHS nurses, more than junior solicitors at smaller firms. But here's the thing the defenders of the system don't like to mention. You can't spend benefits. That £24,000 in housing value is real only if you'd otherwise be paying rent in Westminster. Most people wouldn't. They'd live somewhere cheaper, commute in, and keep the difference as actual money they could save, invest, or spend however they chose. The housing benefit locks you in. It's valuable, but it's not fungible. Same with the meals. 4 meals a day, cooked for you, in a staff dining room. Sounds lovely until you realize you didn't choose what's being served. You're eating on someone else's schedule, in someone else's space, with your colleagues. The meals have value, but they're not the same as £4,500 cash to spend at restaurants you select or on groceries for recipes you want to cook. And there's the privacy question. Living where you work means never quite leaving work. Your colleagues are also your neighbors. Your employer controls your housing. In any other context, we'd recognize that arrangement as carrying significant downsides. Company towns existed. We don't romanticize them. The palace operates a bit like one of those company towns. It provides everything: housing, food, healthcare, community. But in exchange, it surrounds you completely. Your days off might be spent in accommodation owned by your employer, eating food prepared by your employer's kitchens, socializing with people who also work for your employer. The boundaries that most workers take for granted, the commute that marks the end of the workday, the flat that belongs to you alone, simply don't exist. Former employees have described this fuller picture, though they've struggled to gain the same media attention as the exploitation narrative. Nuance rarely goes viral. Outrage does. A former housekeeper who worked at Buckingham Palace in the 2000s told British media that when she calculated what she would have spent on rent and food alone in a comparable private sector cleaning job, the palace position actually paid considerably better. She'd done the same maths I just walked you through and reached the same conclusion. The headline salary figure was misleading. Grant Harrold has made similar observations, drawing on his 2004 to 2011 experience. Total compensation, he's suggested in various interviews, vastly exceeds what cash salary figures alone capture. He went on to build an entire career as the royal butler, consulting for private clients and appearing on television, proof, perhaps, that palace service provides career capital that extends well beyond the years of actual employment. That career capital deserves consideration. Having Buckingham Palace or Clarence House on your CV opens doors that stay closed to others. Hotels, private estates, diplomatic residences, all of them value the training and discretion that palace service supposedly guarantees. A few years measuring toothpaste and positioning waste paper baskets can translate into decades of premium employment elsewhere. Long-serving staff may also receive honors, membership in the Royal Victorian Order, medals presented personally by the monarch. These carry no cash value whatsoever. You can't pay rent with a medal. But they confer status, recognition, a tangible symbol of service that some people value enormously. Prestige as currency. Not everyone accepts that exchange rate, but enough people do that the system perpetuates. So which is it? Exploitation or a genuinely good deal? Here's where I'm supposed to tell you the answer. Here's where the documentary is supposed to land with a verdict, a conclusion, something satisfying that wraps everything up in a neat moral package. I'm not going to do that. Because I genuinely don't know, and I don't think anyone can know with certainty. Not unless you've actually worked there, lived in those staff quarters, felt what it's like to be on call for a state funeral or a coronation, ironed those shoelaces, measured out that inch of toothpaste, retrieved that envelope. The 2023-24 Sovereign Grant Report, released in July 2024, documents approximately £54 million in staff costs, covering roughly 1,200 employees across all departments and residences. The figure encompasses everyone from senior officials like the keeper of the privy purse to entry-level domestic staff, making simple division meaningless. The National Audit Office review from July 2023 noted that the household continues to manage within the level of income provided by the sovereign grant, but also acknowledged challenges in recruiting and retaining staff in London's competitive labor market. That recruitment difficulty tells you something. If total compensation were obviously exploitative, nobody would apply. If it were obviously generous, retention wouldn't be a challenge. The reality is messier than either narrative allows. Confidentiality agreements bind most staff, limiting their ability to discuss experiences even after leaving service. Those who speak publicly, whether motivated by frustration, financial opportunity, or desire for recognition, face criticism from colleagues and establishment voices who regard discretion as a core professional value. The resulting informational asymmetry shapes public understanding. The servants who might confirm either exploitation or satisfaction are largely unable to speak. What we're left with is a gap. The few voices we hear are unrepresentative by definition, people who chose to break confidentiality for whatever reason. The majority experience remains hidden. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's miserable. Maybe it varies enormously depending on which household you serve, which senior staff you work under, which specific royal's toothpaste you're measuring. And then there's the institutional question. Is Charles uniquely demanding, or is he simply what this system inevitably produces? Anti-monarchist organizations like Republic frame the toothpaste and the envelope not as quirks of an individual, but as predictable products of an institution that, by its nature, generates dependence and dysfunction. The argument holds that concentrated hereditary privilege inevitably produces individuals disconnected from basic experiences grounding ordinary human development. When every task is performed for you from infancy, when you never experience the small frustrations and accomplishments of basic self-sufficiency, you develop not as a fully capable adult, but as someone fundamentally dependent on an apparatus of service. The monarchy, in this reading, doesn't merely employ servants. It produces people who cannot function without them. Charles isn't an aberration. He's the system working exactly as designed. The toothpaste isn't his personal quirk. It's what happens when 5 centuries of institutional practice shapes a human being from birth. The iron shoelaces aren't demanding, they're normal. Within the abnormal world he's always inhabited. The envelope he won't reach for isn't laziness. It's learned helplessness elevated to protocol. And if that's true, then the conversation about servant working conditions is asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether the pay is fair. The question is whether the institution that creates both the servants and the served can ever be reformed, or whether its very existence guarantees the dynamics we're discussing. But here's where it gets interesting. William. Prince William and Catherine have reportedly taken a markedly different approach. When they moved to Adelaide Cottage on the Windsor estate in 2022, they made a choice that would have been unthinkable for Charles. No live-in staff. The 4-bedroom property, modest by royal standards, has no room for household staff to reside, no butler sleeping down the hall, no housekeeper living in a servant's wing. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, are being raised in an environment where their parents actually do things. Reports indicate William does school runs, Catherine cooks family meals, not as performance for cameras, but as actual daily practice. They reportedly share childcare duties in ways that royal households historically never required and never allowed. The contrast with Charles's upbringing is stark. Diana worked hard to give her sons experiences of ordinary life, the McDonald's visits, the queuing in shops, but the institutional apparatus still surrounded them. William grew up watching his father ring for servants to retrieve envelopes. He also grew up watching his mother do things herself. He seems to have chosen which model to follow. Their household at Kensington Palace and now Adelaide Cottage operates with fewer staff than Charles maintained as Prince of Wales. The exact numbers aren't public, but reporting consistently describes a leaner operation. Staff who work for William and Catherine describe expectations that, while still demanding, don't involve the absurdist specificity of ironed shoelaces and measured toothpaste. There's something deliberate here, something that looks like a conscious rejection of the way William was raised, at least partially. He saw what the full apparatus did to his father. He saw what it did to his parents' marriage. He seems determined not to replicate it. For those who want to believe the monarchy can modernize, and surveys suggest that's roughly 45% of the British public, William and Catherine offer permission to hope. The next generation might be different. The system might evolve. The children growing up in Adelaide Cottage might emerge as adults capable of squeezing their own toothpaste. Whether this represents genuine change or merely better public relations, no one can say yet. The proof will come in decades, not years. George is 11. By the time he's Charles's age, we'll know whether the pattern truly broke or simply paused. But the precedent of history suggests optimism might be premature. Queen Elizabeth II, by most accounts, was less demanding than Charles in her personal requirements. She was known for relative simplicity in private life, for doing some things herself that Charles would never consider. Yet the system persisted. The approximately 1,200 employees remained. The master of the households department still oversaw the scarlet liveried footmen and the housekeepers and the kitchens. The infrastructure of service continued unabated. The institution predates any individual and will outlast all of them. It has survived world wars and constitutional crises and the slow erosion of aristocratic assumptions across British society. It continues because enough people continue showing up to work there, drawn by the benefits package, the career capital, the proximity to history, or simply because it's a job in a city where jobs are competitive, and this one comes with somewhere to live. Every year, job listings appear. Every year, people apply. Every year, someone new learns how to position a waste paper basket with geometric precision and squeeze exactly 1 inch of toothpaste onto a royal brush. So where does that leave us? With a picture that refuses to resolve into simple outrage or simple defense. The salary figures are genuinely low by any reasonable standard. Minimum wage for demanding work in the most expensive city in Britain, working for the wealthiest family in the country. That's a fact. The benefits package, when properly calculated, transforms that compensation picture entirely. £55,000 to £60,000 in total value for a housekeeping position. That's also a fact. But those benefits come with strings. Loss of privacy. Loss of autonomy. Housing you can't take with you. Meals you didn't choose. A company town behind palace walls. The absurdist requirements. The toothpaste, the envelope, the ironed shoelaces, the precisely positioned bins, the geometric butter arrangements are real and documented by people who work there. They reveal something about what the institution does to those raised within it. Whether that amounts to exploitation depends on questions I can't answer for you. Is it degrading to measure someone's toothpaste, even if you're well compensated for doing so? Is the trade-off of privacy and autonomy worth the housing and meals? Does the career capital of palace service justify the demanding conditions? Does it matter that the person requiring your labor was made this way by the same institution that now employs you? The comment section on royal servant videos splits almost exactly in half. Some viewers are appalled by the salaries. Others point out the benefits. Neither side convinces the other because both are working with incomplete information and different value systems. I suspect that's where you are now, somewhere in that split, leaning one way or the other, but not entirely certain. 1 inch of toothpaste. Is it the mark of exploitation? The price of free London housing? Evidence of institutional rot that produces dependent monarchs? A glimpse into a world most of us can barely imagine. A job that's actually better compensated than most coverage suggests? Or is it all of these things at once? The coronation in May 2023 required hundreds of staff working around the clock. The funeral in September 2022 demanded the same. Nearly 500 years of precedent weigh on every footman's livery, every housekeeper's routine, every precisely measured inch of toothpaste. The system continues. The staff quarters remain occupied, the job listings still appear, and somewhere in a palace, someone is probably squeezing toothpaste onto a brush right now, making sure it's exactly the right length. Whether that person feels exploited or fortunate, grateful for the housing or resentful of the demands, proud of their role in history or counting the days until they can leave, I genuinely don't know. And neither, probably, do you. That's the tension this story refuses to resolve. Maybe it can't be resolved. Maybe it shouldn't be. Subscribe for more stories like this.